Coming up on our newscast tonight, South Korea's ruling and main opposition parties reach an agreement to vote on the revised budget for 2019, but there's still some work to be done on the spending plan, and they need to get the minor opposition parties on board. Seoul starts the day with the mercury plummeting to -6 degrees Celsius, with the wind chill factor making it feel more like -16. Meanwhile, heavy snow is expected in the southern provinces and Jeju Island. The government advises the public to take all necessary precautions as the strong winds and freezing temperatures will continue through the weekend. A special ceremony is held to mark South Korea's Trade Day. At the event, President Moon Jae-in highlights the need to boost the country's exports through diversification and greater participation by small and mid-sized firms. He also pledged to provide greater support for SMEs in such efforts. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Che. It's long overdue, but the National Assembly is set to vote on the 2019 budget plan later today. On Thursday, the two main parties reached an agreement to settle the revised version of the spending bill. However, that deal was criticized by minor opposition blocs as it did not include their demand to overhaul how elections are conducted. Let's connect to our parliamentary correspondent Kim Min-ji right now. Min-ji, how are things looking at this point?
Daniel, a plenary session got underway just about half an hour ago at 7:30 p.m., rescheduled from 4 p.m. this afternoon. Rival parties at the moment are voting on some 200 pending bills related to people's livelihoods. Now, once they're done with that, they plan to adjourn the session and wait until the budget plan is ready for a full floor vote. Now, this comes after the ruling Democratic Party and the main opposition Liberty Korea Party on Thursday reached an agreement to vote on the revised budget today. However, it's unclear just exactly when the vote will take place, given the work that still needs to be done. What we do know at the moment is that there will be a cut to the proposed spending set aside for inter-Korean projects and job creation. Meanwhile, there will be an increase for infrastructure as well as for the budget that will be used to tackle the low birth rate issue. Now, the budget isn't a total win for either party, but they're happy that they can settle the bill before the end of Parliament's 100-day regular session, which closes this week. But the agreement did not include commitment to reforming the country's electoral system, something that the minor parties had been demanding.
And of course, the minor opposition blocs are clearly letting their feelings known, strong opposition to the way things are progressing right now.
Well, I don't know if you can see behind me, but the minor opposition parties have launched an indefinite period of sit-in demonstrations, with some party chairs even launching a hunger strike. Now, they have been demanding a promise from the two biggest parties to reform the country's electoral system as a condition for passing the budget. Now, they want to adopt a new proportional representation system under which seats would be allocated based on the proportion of the vote won by each party. But the ruling and main opposition parties said that it's a matter that needs to be dealt with separately. The minor opposition parties accuse the bigger parties of collusion to prioritize their vested rights over the people's wishes. Now, it's unclear whether the minor opposition will cooperate in the budget's passage, but even without them, the two biggest parties together have enough seats in Parliament to pass the budget. And if passed, it comes 5 days after the legal deadline of December 2nd. Back to you, Daniel.
All right, thank you for being out there for us, Min-ji. We appreciate it. Moving on to other stories now, a special event is held to mark Trade Day when the role exports played in the country's economic growth is recognized. President Moon Jae-in spoke to the leaders of smaller firms, urging them to get more involved in overseas trade and pledge greater government support. The South Korean leader also emphasized that as trade grows, it must help improve the lives of the people. Shin Se-min shares with us his remarks.
President Moon Jae-in, during a speech at a ceremony marking the Trade Day, emphasized once again the need to boost the country's trade front and said it's important that the country's strength in exports helps create inclusive growth.
이제 우리는 자랑스러운 수출의 성과를 함께 잘 사는 포용적 성장으로 이어가야 합니다. 수출 확대가 좋은 일자리의 확대로 이어져야 하며 국민들의 삶이 더 나아지는 방향으로 가야 합니다.
President Moon mentioned the importance of promoting new export items and cultivating new overseas markets for Korean products, as well as the need to create new exporters to drive the economy in the future.
특히 수출 품목 다양화는 많은 중소, 중견기업의 참여로 시작됩니다. 중소, 중견기업이 수출에 더 많이 나설 수 있도록 정부가 적극 지원할 것입니다.
And he said the growth of exports by SMEs could help the export-dependent economy compete in a climate of trade protectionism and global economic slowdown. He added his administration will do its part to promote free trade on the global stage and said it will continue negotiations on the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the RCEP, a 15-country free trade agreement, which includes China and Japan, with the aim of wrapping up the deal before the end of 2019. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
It's not surprising that export powerhouses like South Korea designate a national day to celebrate the country's trading prowess. To mark the occasion, our Kim Jong-un provides an in-depth analysis of the nation's trade environment and the challenges that lie ahead.
South Korea's outbound shipments have hit a lot of milestones this year. For the second straight year, South Korea's trade volume has surpassed $1 trillion. The country is expected to top $600 billion in exports for the first time ever this year as well. Semiconductors, machinery, and petrochemical exports increased this year compared to last year, while outbound shipments in the display and telecommunications industries dropped on year. Not everyone is enjoying the fruits of this success because most of the outbound shipments are related to the IT and electronics, which aren't labor-intensive, so the link to employment is weak. And recent data out of the Bank of Korea shows facility investment actually dropped on quarter in Q3.
The machinery used by Korean conglomerates, which make up most of the country's facility investments, are not produced by local small and mid-sized companies, but are imported from overseas.
The country's heavy reliance on trade for growth has its drawbacks. Uncertainties stemming from rising trade protectionism are becoming a major risk, especially as nearly 70% of South Korea's yearly gross domestic product currently depends on its leading trading partners, China and the U.S. The intermediary goods South Korea ships to China that are used to make goods for export to the U.S. will be the hardest hit from a resumption of the Beijing-Washington trade war. Although a temporary truce has been forged, the tit-for-tat tariffs are viewed by some as merely a cover in the fight for hegemony in the economic, technological, and defense sectors, as China challenges the U.S. For this, it's advised for Korea to join with other countries to empower the World Trade Organization in the face of rising trade disputes, including those related to industrial subsidies and tariff threats, especially those coming from the Trump administration. Kim Jong-un, Arirang News.
If you're out and about here in Korea, we hope you've bundled up. It's been a bone-chilling Friday so far, with temperatures dipping down to some of the lowest levels we've seen this season. Cha Sang-mi tells us more.
The temperatures plunged early Friday morning. In Seoul, the mercury dropped to -6 degrees Celsius, but with the wind chill, it felt like -16. Cold wave advisories were issued in many places like Hwacheon County and Gangwon-do Province, where it dropped to -18.8 degrees, the lowest in the country. Meanwhile, heavy snow is coming to the southern provinces and Jeju Island, and forecasters say the extreme cold is expected to last through the weekend.
This cold snap came in from the north. The temperature will hover around -10 degrees Celsius until this weekend. It will gradually get warmer next week, but it will still be colder than average this time of year.
The forecasters said it would normally be about -1.7 degrees, but this year it's -9 to -11. Still, he said cold snaps are normal at this time of the year when we're moving from fall to winter. The cold will come and go, repeating until it's officially winter. Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon on Friday called on government ministries to prepare for the strong wind and cold to continue. He called on the Safety Ministry in particular to prepare for heavy snow and possible casualties in mountainous areas. The Transport Ministry was told to take special safety measures for drivers and local governments to advise people in the affected areas to stay indoors and be careful not to slip and fall. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
Still no exact details on North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's possible visit to Seoul, something he promised during the summit in September. According to Seoul's unification minister, the two sides are discussing ways to make it happen. For now, Pyongyang has not given a definite answer. Woo Jung-hee gets us up to speed with the developments.
Will North Korean leader Kim Jong-un visit South Korea before the year is up? South Korea's unification minister Cho Myung-kyun says Seoul is discussing with Pyongyang to have Kim come visit the South this year, as agreed at the Inter-Korean Summit in September. The comment came while he spoke in Parliament on Friday. Cho added that Pyongyang has a clear will to implement the September summit agreement, but the regime has not given a specific answer to the South regarding the visit. As North Korea-U.S. nuclear negotiations are deadlocked with no high-level or working-level talks between the two sides, there are questions as to whether Kim Jong-un will really visit South Korea as promised. But after South Korean President Moon Jae-in and U.S. President Donald Trump met on the sidelines of the G20 summit last week, President Moon explicitly told the press that the possibility of Kim's South Korea visit is open, raising speculation that Kim may actually come. Various dates are being thrown out on when that visit may happen. Many are speculating it could be either side of December 17th, the anniversary of Kim Jong-il's death, Kim Jong-un's father. But considering the lack of time to prepare, more are leaning towards after the 17th. Seoul says Kim's visit to South Korea this year will provide momentum to North Korea-U.S. relations and denuclearization talks. But still, whether it'll happen for real is up to Kim. A Blue House official said Seoul has not yet received a message from North Korea about Kim Jong-un's reciprocal visit to the South. Woo Jung-hee, Arirang News.
While a lot of attention is drawn to the reciprocal visit to the South by the regime's leader, there are other important topics concerning Seoul, Pyongyang, and Washington that requires attention. The National Security Committee held a meeting today. According to the nation's top office National Security Chief Chung Yu-yong, and the standing members of the committee discussed the upcoming Seoul-Washington defense cost-sharing talks, as well as inter-Korean projects. The committee reviewed the progress made on the two Koreas' military agreements signed in September and discussed further measures on the railway talks. Weeks have gone by with no progress in talks between North Korea and the United States. Despite the lack of clear way forward, Seoul and Washington are staying in close touch. Lee Ju-won has the latest in coordination between the allies.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa met with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on Thursday. According to her, they talked about a range of issues, with North Korea, of course, high on the agenda.
We discussed various topics, including North Korea's denuclearization, Pyongyang-Washington talks, and inter-Korean ties as well.
On Friday, Minister Kang completed her 4-day trip to the U.S., during which she attended the funeral of former President George H.W. Bush and met with her counterpart, whom she last saw 2 months ago in Seoul. According to Seoul's foreign ministry, Kang and Secretary Pompeo reaffirmed their close cooperation toward the final fully verified denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, and also promised to continue working toward a satisfactory agreement on sharing the cost of U.S. troops in South Korea. Also on Friday, the new working group on North Korea set up by the allies met by video conferencing. It was for working-level officials, so the nuclear envoys of each side who led the group did not take part. But it did include staff from the State Department and South Korea's Ministries of Foreign Affairs, Unification, and Defense, as well as the Blue House. For over an hour, the two sides discussed the latest developments with North Korea, as well as the regime's denuclearization. Formed last month, the group seeks to meet face-to-face once a month and hold a video call in the middle to check progress. In the meantime, South Korea's nuclear envoy Lee Do-hoon spent time on Friday with delegates from the National Committee on American Foreign Policy. They discussed inter-Korean ties and the talks between Pyongyang and Washington. Seoul's foreign ministry said the meeting was a chance to enhance the delegates' understanding of South Korea's policies to gain their support. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
The two Koreas held a vice ministerial meeting at the Joint Liaison Office in Kaesong to discuss various pending issues linked to the peninsula. According to the nation's Unification Ministry, Vice Unification Minister Chun Hae-sung and his North Korean counterpart Jeon Jong-soo met at the border village today. Seoul and Pyeongyang originally agreed on a weekly meeting, but this one comes a month after the last one on November 9th. The co-heads of the office agreed to work together in making progress on the various inter-Korean cooperation projects. A group of 10 South Korean officials and forestry experts are making a 3-day trip to Pyeongyang next week for inter-Korean forestry cooperation. The visit comes after officials from Seoul visited North Korea's border town of Kaesong last week to deliver pesticides and perform pest control operations. According to the nation's Unification Ministry, the officials and experts will see how the chemicals they gave to the regime have been distributed and used and visit local tree nurseries and factories making forestry equipment. They'll also have working-level discussions with their North Korean counterparts to carry out what was agreed at their forestry talks in late October. Cho Tae-yeol has been elected to lead the executive board of 3 UN agencies. He is the first South Korean official to achieve this feat since the world body's establishment. Park Hee-jun explains what the ambassador's new job entails.
South Korea's ambassador to the United Nations, Cho Tae-yeol, has been elected president of the executive board of the UN Development Program, the UN Population Fund, and the UN Office for Project Services. Cho was inaugurated in New York on Thursday as the head of the executive board of the 3 UN bodies for 2019. It's the first time for a South Korean official to be appointed chief since the board was established in 1994. The executive board is a 36-nation body that supervises the activities of the 3 agencies. Seoul's foreign ministry says Cho's election is down to the international community's recognition of South Korea's leading role as an executive board member and a donor nation. During his 1-year term, he will coordinate with the heads of each organization and chair regular meetings within the board. With Cho taking the post, the foreign ministry anticipates South Korea will broaden the scope of its diplomacy at the UN and strengthen its leadership on the international stage. South Korea is also expected to act as a mediator between donor and recipient countries, with its experience of having advanced from a beneficiary country to a donor country. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
North Korea's Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho is in China for a 3-day visit, and today he met with Beijing's Foreign Minister Wang Yi. It's expected that Wang briefed Ri on the result of last week's U.S.-China summit talks while discussing Pyongyang-Beijing bilateral relations and the recent developments on the Korean peninsula. Though not confirmed, there is also speculation that Ri may meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Ri's visit to China comes as speculation rises on whether North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will visit South Korea before the end of this year, as agreed with President Moon Jae-in at their September summit. The U.S. trade deficit hit a 10-year high in October. The U.S. Commerce Department revealed on Thursday that imports outpaced exports by more than $55 billion. Lee Seung-jae reports.
With U.S. soybean exports dropping further and imports of consumer goods rising to a record high, the U.S. trade deficit soared to a high not seen in a decade in October. The trade deficit was up 1.7% on year, standing at $55.5 billion US dollars. That's the highest since October 2008. The majority of the deficit came from China and the European Union. The U.S. trade deficit with China spiked 7.1% to a record $43.1 billion. The trade gap with the EU widened a staggering 65.5% to a record $17.6 billion. Led by shipments of medicine and automobiles, overall import numbers rose 0.2% to a record $266.5 billion, while exports edged down 0.1% to $211 billion. President Trump campaigned on a pledge to slash America's long-standing trade deficit with the rest of the world by slapping import taxes on steel, aluminum, and Chinese goods. However, the deficit so far this year is running almost 11.5% above January to October of 2017. However, economists view the trade deficit as a result of a stronger U.S. economy as Americans are buying more foreign products. At the same time, Americans buy more than they produce, with imports filling the gap. U.S. exports are also being hurt by the American dollar's role as the world's currency. With the strong greenback comes a rise in the prices of U.S. products, putting American companies at a disadvantage in foreign markets. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea's overseas direct investment increased on year in the third quarter, mainly due to rising investment in the manufacturing sector. According to the Ministry of Economy and Finance on Friday, Korea's overseas direct investment was $13.11 billion in the third quarter, up 33% on year. Investment in foreign manufacturing accounted for more than 38% of the total. The ministry attributed the hike to increase in mergers and acquisitions activities in the industry. By region, Asia was the #1 destination for domestic firms' investment, followed by North America and Europe. South Korea's first couple met at the top office with representatives of the nation's biggest charitable organizations to encourage them and to cultivate a culture of donation in light of the holiday season. According to Cheonghwa, 29 people were invited from 15 organizations, including the Salvation Army, the Korean Red Cross, World Vision, and UNICEF. Praising their organization's hard work, President Moon said they embody the very spirit of giving and sharing and pledged that he himself would put all his efforts into making South Korea a country in which everybody can prosper together. A team of South Korean 씨름 wrestlers are visiting the Canary Islands this week to compete in the championship of Spanish folk wrestling called Lucha Canaria. There, the Koreans also demonstrated what 씨름, or Korean folk wrestling, is all about. Choi Xiang files us this report.
Late last month, wrestlers from Spain participated in the 2018 Korea 씨름 Festival in the city of Andong. Now, in return, these South Koreans are in Spain's Canary Islands to join in a competition of local folk wrestling, the Lucha Canaria World Championship. It's the first time the tournament's invited athletes from overseas. The South Korean team has 25 members, male and female. They had just 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, to learn Canarian wrestling before competing in the tournament, which runs from Wednesday to Saturday. On the tournament's first day, the Koreans demonstrate their own folk wrestling, 씨름, to the Spanish athletes and spectators.
This is my first time I've seen 씨름 in real time, except on TV. I really like it.
It's an experience I love to have again. I want to learn more about it.
On the second day, it's time for the Koreans to compete in the Canarian style. On the third day, it's the Spanish wrestlers amongst themselves. And on the fourth and final day, the Korean survivors have to face the Spanish athletes to determine the winner. South Korea and Spain have also discussed making this cultural exchange a regular event. And next year's championship is expected to have even more participants from overseas, including wrestlers from Senegal, Russia, and Mongolia. Choi Xiang, Arirang News, Las Palmas.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, the freezing weather we are experiencing today is more of a sneak peek of what's to come in the weekend.
That's right, Daniel. Now, with strong winds enhancing the cold conditions, we'll feel like minus 19 degrees Celsius on the weekend. And cold wave alerts have been issued all across the nation, and it will be remaining effective as the mercury remains around the minus 10 degree mark. In addition to the freezing temperatures, snow are expected to continue falling in the southwestern parts of the peninsula until tomorrow. It looks like the west coast will get most amount of snow, with precipitation expected to accumulate up to 10 centimeters and between 1 and 5 centimeters depending on the regions. The cold conditions will continue throughout Saturday, especially for Seoul and Beijing, while Tokyo is warmer than the seasonal average. And the current cold wave is expected to peak tomorrow morning, with Seoul waking up to minus 11 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon to minus 14. And the daily highs in Seoul will only get up to minus 3, while Daegu and Gyeongju just makes it over 0 degrees. Now, there will be improvements next week, though, as the highs bounce back up to the positive territory. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we could pack into tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thanks for staying with us.